about every 3 or 4 months. It's not something that we do once a month. I'd like to recognize the registration and greeting team. Would you please stand? Lily Rapp, she's already standing, I think. Laura Driftwood in the back. Beth Hollingsworth. Mary Sue McCarty had a car accident yesterday and is unable to be here with us. Vicki Slayton may come in, that's Brian Slayton, Representative Brian Slayton's mother. They may be able to come in a little bit later, they said. And Jerry Fisher, our SREC person who you will hear from. And I'd also like to tell you and introduce to you Sheep Coffee. Robert Clementi is a family-owned business. He got hit quite a bit by the pandemic, like lots of companies. We talked, and I thought that we should provide you with a little extra pleasure. So please visit the Sheep Coffee if you need one of the cards and advertise for them. They're a family-owned business, so I know that you will enjoy their wave at us, Robert and Carol in the back. So I'm going to let Ray come up now, and he's going to introduce some people that are going to talk to you just a couple minutes each, and then we're going to be so thrilled to hear Trey Trainor.
Thank you, Tilly. First of all, I want to thank John Vick and Bob Hall, the other gentleman in Bob Hall's office. I don't know his name.
Chris
Martin.
Chris Morris.
Thank you, Morris. Thank you so much for coming, and thank Bob Hall. The Senator Bob Hall is always on the job, and he always cares about us, and he's always here to represent you, so please understand that. Well, you know, folks, Trump won in a landslide. He really did. And, you know, I think he got over 85 million votes, but, you know, who knows? But people out there like Mike Lindell, Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, General Mike Flynn, they're keeping the fire burning for us. And we've got people right here in Kaufman County and in Senate District 2 that keep the fire burning for us too. And first of all, I'd like to bring up Steve Stanley. Steve Stanley is our SREC. He is the head of the committee, I believe, on constitutional carry. And Steve, come up just for a couple of minutes and explain just a little bit what's going on with you. And then we'll have his counterpart, Jerry Fisher, will come too. Come on, Jerry.
Thank y'all so much for coming out today, but we need help. The session is not over, okay? Your state reps and state senators, well, we don't have to worry about Bob, but they need help making decisions, okay? They don't know how to vote. They need phone calls. They need us to go to Austin and hang out with them. We've got 2 weeks to go. So, please go home, get to Liz, and just start making phone calls, because it's almost over and it's not looking too sweet right now. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Does everybody know what the SREC is? Your State Republican Executive Committee? Yeah. Okay, just making sure. Some folks go, SREC. My name is Stephen Stanley. I am your SREC committee man for counterpart. I actually chair the Constitutional Carry Subcommittee for the Republican Party. Okay. How many in here want a constitutional carry? Okay, most of the room. Well, we've had an interesting time trying to get this thing passed. It started off in the House. The bill that actually was moving and has been moving forward. It passed out of the House with a few amendments. Everything was fine. Got over to the Senate. At first, this is one of the games that gets played in the House and the Senate. Lieutenant Governor Patrick was saying, I'm not going to bring it to the floor until there's 18 votes. There was 2 or 3 senators Republican senators that were saying, I'm not gonna give a position on this until it comes to the floor. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Finally, when the lieutenant governor created a special committee on constitutional issues, he put Senator Hall and others on this bill. He charged Senator Schwartner with carrying the bill in the Senate. They called for the special hearing. There was 183 or 184 people that testified that day. I was down there and testified as well. I talked to a gentleman that had dinner with the lieutenant governor that night because of all the work that everybody, I'm sure a lot of you in this room did. GOA, Texas Gun Rights, other gun groups and stuff, our SRECs and information that we were putting out. The lieutenant governor got over 10,000 phone calls about this issue. One of the things that Lieutenant Colonel Alan West did when he became chairman is he charged the SRECs, the Legislative Priorities Committee, that, we've got 8 priorities that the people put forward. Texas Scorecard put out today a list of the priorities for the governor, a list of priorities for the lieutenant governor, a list of priorities for the Speaker of the House, and then the RPT. Guess whose priorities are getting done?
Not ours.
Exactly. We cannot give up, just like what Jerry was saying. The session's not over. We gotta push until, please, if you're not signed up for our legislative stat updates from the RPT, get with Jerry or I afterward. We'll tell you how to get on there and you can get these updates because we're pushing it out sometimes 2 or 3 times a day right now when we're seeing bills fixing to, get traded. There's too many times we having bills, our priorities, it gets onto the floor of the House, especially, and whoever's carrying it in the House, they're accepting all kinds of Democrat amendments right now, and then after they've watered it down, guess what? The Democrats still vote against it. So why do we capitulate and give up all this ground? We need to get our people to hold their ground. We're in the majority, act like it.
Thank you, Steve. Next of all, we have a couple here, a great couple that's coming all the way from Tyler, represents Grassroots America, with We the People, with Joanne Fleming's group, with Tom and Tony Fabry. Tom, if y'all will come up just for a second, he's coming now. This organization is the backbone of East Texas, really is, as far as conservative values and really promoting conservative principles. Grassroots America, We the People is the one.
Thank you, Ray. I'm Tom Fabry. Tyler now. We escaped recently, actually last year, from Frisco. Escape is the right word, from the property taxes, from the density, from the traffic. There's going to be more people living in Frisco per square miles than there is in the city of Dallas. That's incredible. That's what happens when the wrong set of people start taking over your government. And that's what Grassroots America is actually all about. So Joanne Fleming asked, she's actually in Arlington tonight for a regional meeting of a bunch of other grassroots leaders. So sent us over to represent her. Grassroots America operates on 2 levels primarily. On the local level, the goal is to ensure that Smith County, the Tyler ISD, and the City Council are good stewards of their dollars and the policies are consistent with liberty principles. And that's been their mission now for 12, 14 years, I guess it's been. Before that, Joanne Fleming was actually a city council person, a county commissioner, so she knows both sides of the dais as well. The second thing that Joanne is doing is putting together, like this group here, a group called Texas Conservative Grassroots Coalition. It's a group of leaders and thought leaders and key validated Republican conservative leaders, not all, that's an important qualification, that meet once a quarter to lay out the strategy for the grassroots statewide. This is a really, really critical endeavor that is well, resulted in this among other groups, but it really coordinates the literally 456, I believe the current number is, thought leaders, precinct chairs, and club leaders from around the state. Each of those several hundreds of leaders represent literally hundreds of people back home. So when the Texas Conservative Grassroots Coalition puts together a coalition letter signed by those 400 people and delivers it to the governor, lieutenant governor, and the respective committee chairs or whatever, it has an impact because that represents literally tens of thousands of voters. So the next level on that is creating groups like this across the state, SD groups, so that we take the strategy from the statewide organization down to the Senate district level, which then we coordinate. It's not an organization per se, it's networking and communications, so that all of the organizations within at SD has an opportunity to push the narrative forward. And that's what it's all about. It's tactics and communications. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. So one example of that is during the session, somebody created an idea for a postcard with all of those 8 priorities on it. And that postcard literally handed out to groups across the state. Tens of thousands, literally tens of thousands of these were delivered. We know of one particular case when somebody was moving a bill out of one of the priority bills out of Congress. Literally a box of these was dumped on that individual's desk the day after these were handed out. And they don't get mailed, they get delivered. So there's a huge impact on the recipients. So that's the Texas Grassroots Coalition. But Grassroots America, we the people, working at a local level, working at the statewide level, and organizing these SD groups so that we the people, have the final word. Because we know that there's hopefully going to be a special session to deal with the ones that weren't, the priorities that weren't done, and we know that there's going to be a special session for redistricting. And you might think that there's going to be some problems with redistricting. Yeah, just a couple perhaps. So that's what Joanne Fleming, that's what Grassroots America is all about. I have some brochures on the back table there that you can pick up on the way out. I would encourage you, if you want to get on the mailing list about stuff going on across the state and in the legislature, go to Grassroots America, We the People, GAWTP.com, hashtag /, get on the mailing list, or text to send a text to almost had a Biden moment there. Text to 53445 and with the words #grassroots, and we'll get you on the email list. So thank you for your time, appreciate it, and thank you for this great event tonight, right?
Next up, we need Dr. Dwayne Collins up here. He's our counterpart down in Van Zandt County, and I'm gonna tell him 2 minutes.
Your 2 minutes?
And we have a call into the air conditioning people, just to let you know that. But anyway, Doc, this guy is my right arm down here. And he's vice versa. We work together, been working together for years, have been all over the country together, working, knocking doors and doing things, and not just Texas, but everywhere else. Doc.
Greetings from the free state of Van Zandt. Many of you know I ran for state rep. I like to say I came in third. It sounds better than last. I did accomplish what the goal was to send home an 18-year incumbent, and because I was in the race, Brian Slayton ended up in the runoff. And I was taking my campaign signs down, I was putting Brian's up, and you know what we did, and we got us a good representative. I put my Tea Party activity in Van Zandt County on the back burner. I ran for president of the Republican Club in Van Zandt County. I am now the 120 people that would attend the Republican meeting. The first meeting that we held, we had 70. The second meeting, we had 140. We put on a little event to make a statement that Van Zandt County was not going to do like a lot of communities and cities across the nation, and especially Austin, in defunding our police. We put on a benefit for the sheriff's office to raise money to replace their protective vests. We just had it this Saturday. Our goal was $16,000. We're still counting. The money's still coming in. We're sitting at $34,000. These are the type of things that we're doing. I don't know, the attendance may fall this next Monday, and I'll invite you down there because I'm the guest speaker. I'm speaking on the border. I work with the Texas Border Volunteers. I can speak eons about them. Dr. Mike Vickers, a cohort of mine, veterinarian down there on the border. You may have seen him on Fox News. He's been there a couple of times because of what's happening down on the border. We have 4 ops a year. We've already had 1 this year. We're going down at the end of this month. We station ourselves in the bush during the night with our night vision, spot illegals, turn them over to the border patrol. Our first watch of this year, we saw more illegals than we did the past 2 years combined. Folks, it is unreal. If you want me to come to your group to bring my power presentation to your group, let me know, get in touch with me, come down there and visit us. But near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to paraphrase some scripture here, unless the Lord rebuilds the house, it's the people that rebuild it labor in vain. We took God with us at our founding. We've lost our direction. We have said we've got to get the churches back involved. My efforts down in Van Zandt County, come to our June meeting. I have 2 preachers coming. You've already heard from one of them, Marty Reed. He's going to talk on the Black Road Regiment. He's teeing it up for the next speaker, Raphael Cruz. And Raphael's going to talk about the United States, what he sees in relationship to what he experienced in Cuba. That's teeing it up for July. I want to invite everybody here to Van Zandt County during July. There's a camp meeting that's been going on for the last 24 years, except for last year because of COVID. There's an evangelical preacher that comes in every night, a different one. There are 700 to 1,000 people each night, except for the last night, because the last 3 times that we've had it, and this year is no exception. Dr. Robert Jeffers is our speaker on Friday night. We've got Alliance Defending Freedom. We've got Bunny Pounce's group coming in. We're going to sit there. We're going to talk to the preachers and to the religious. We're going to fire them up and get them out to vote. Y'all need to do the same. You can do the same thing in your county, in your little group. Fire them up. So anyway, that's what we've got going down in Van Zandt County. Come visit us. I think you'll like Van Zandt County. Thank you.
Okay, we got one more I want to introduce. This guy's coming up, Eugene Ralph. He's got let me tell you, he's got a demeanor like President Trump. So if you like the way President Trump talks, you're going to like this guy. He tells them with no filter. Eugene, come up here.
That's not true, Ray. I do have a filter. It's great to see you guys, room full of patriots. You know, I thank the Lord on a regular basis that I live in SD2, because I'm telling you folks, I almost was in SD23. I was growing too. Just want to share with you tonight, one of the things I've noticed is that we often take too docile an attitude towards those who we elect to office. It's time out for that. We have to have a more aggressive approach. Keep in mind, we elect them to work for us. You should never tolerate any kind of foolishness coming from an elected official that talks down to you. In some people's cases, they point it in their faces and still have the fingers. And all kinds of foolishness like that. We elect people to office, and when they run, they often run us and talk talk about how conservative they are, how much they love the Lord, but when they get to office, like Jared Patterson right now, who's not supporting us on this child gender modification law, he's not supportive of that. We have Republicans, supposed to be conservatives, who are not supporting the things that they say they support. We can't tolerate that, folks. So when you hear these people say, when you go home tonight, it doesn't matter what time you call their offices. They have recorders running. They will get the message in the morning. Jack them up. I'm not going to tell you to call there and be polite. If you're upset, let that come through in your voice. I'm not saying go there and curse them out or anything like that. But you need to let them know in no uncertain terms that you want them to support the things that we fight for. We don't go to conventions every 2 years to listen to these people give us a bunch of crap when it comes time to pass the laws that we want. And then they'll run out here and talk about how great a job they did. That's hogwash. We can't tolerate that. We're losing this state because of a bunch of reprobates down there in Austin playing games on our dime. We can't tolerate that. I'll tell you something, folks. As an American and as a Christian, we have a job to do. The job we have to do is something that is a mandate. It's not an option. We have to go out here and do what we need to do. We need to talk to the people we need to talk to. And we, next Thursday night at Red Texas meeting over in the Republic Church of Christ, I will be speaking about the mindset, developing and maintaining the proper mindset in order to be successful in the time that we're in. And I encourage you to come out if you can.
Last, I want to recognize someone that's here tonight that's actually grown to really love and her husband Dalton over in Rockwall. These people are great people. She has been the county chair over there for 5 years. She's just stepped down, whatever. She's not going away. Don't get me wrong. She's not going away. But Laverne Kimber is one of those special people that she even took a liking to a rascal like me from Dalton County, coming over there, and listening to their programs and doing it. We cannot survive unless we get out and cross the lines. I see people here from Ellis County and Johnson County and of course Dallas County, Denton County. They're here tonight, and thank goodness that we have that. We call it outreach, and that's what we're trying to do here in Kaufman County is outreach. And Laverne Kimber has been great at that. Thank you so much for your service, Laverne. You and Now we're getting down to the deal. I've been so excited to get Trey Trainor to come up here. I've known about Trey for a long time. I know that he was involved with council with the Republican Party of Texas for 1 or 2 terms. But Trey has been working with us, and he's got a great reputation as being a tough lawyer and a guy that takes no prisoners whenever he gets, if he's after that issue, he stands with it. Trey Trainor is President Trump's director of federal elections, the Federal Election Commission. He was nominated by President Trump to confirm the United States Senate on May 19, 2020. He was appointed to a term ending in April 2023, so he's still there. Commissioner Trainor of Driftwood, Texas, has practiced law for 2 decades, particularly in the areas of election law, campaign finance, law, and ethics. He has served as the General Counsel to the Texas Secretary of State and Counsel to the Texas House Committee on Regulatory Industries, and has represented the Texas Republican Party in 2 presidential campaigns. Commissioner Trainor has also served as an advisory board of the United States Election Assistance Commission. And Commissioner Trainor is on the front lines back in November and during this election cycle when we all went through such turmoil. Commissioner Trainor, we ask you to come and talk to us. Come on. Thank you so much, brother. Appreciate you coming.
Thank you, Ray. Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes. Close enough? No. As Ray said, my name is Trey Trainor. I'm a commissioner on the Federal Election Commission. For those of you that don't know, I'll tell you real quickly about the commission. It's a bipartisan commission made up of 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. It's an independent executive agency, so we all serve a term so that the president can't remove us once they leave office. So I'm there as long as Senator McConnell's not upset with me, I'll be on the Federal Election Commission. We handle mostly campaign finance related issues. We manage the presidential election fund, and obviously we know quite a bit about what goes on in elections around the country. But what I want to talk to you about tonight really has very little to do with my job at the Federal Election Commission, and has more to do with what is a passion of mine. As Ray said, I've been practicing election law for almost 20 years. I represented President Trump in 2016 in the recounts that took place in Michigan. I represented Rick Perry when he didn't make the ballot in Virginia. So I've been involved at the presidential level. I've handled recounts for state representatives. I've handled recounts for county commissioners. I've been on the front lines fighting for conservative Republicans in the state legislature. I've counseled those members, worked with them. I worked in the Texas legislature for about 10 years, so spent plenty of time in politics and know what happens in these elections. And what we have going on right now is a crisis of confidence in our elections. And what I want to talk to you about tonight is what we have to do to restore trust in a compromised election system. So, free and fair elections are the foundation of our nation, and they are a key mechanism through which we allocate our resources, set our priorities, resolve conflicts. And if the people don't have confidence in our elections and participate freely in them, our constitutional republic is not going to endure. The most important task that we have before us, and I know we've heard a lot from Senator Hall tonight about what's going on in Austin. We're all concerned about constitutional carry. But the most important task that we all have in front of us is to ensure that our future elections are conducted openly, fairly, and legally. And over time, we're going to learn more about what happened in the 2020 elections. There's an audit going on in Arizona. There's investigations that are going on in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. Interestingly enough, after the 2000 election, everybody ran down to Florida and wanted to see all of the chads and recount all the ballots to see whether or not Al Gore had won. But you don't see the media rushing out to see what the ballots look like after this election, do you? So without secure elections, our rights are not protected. Our freedom is threatened, and our constitutional republic cannot survive. Nothing is more important to our long-term progress and sustainability than to maintain the foundation of fair and open elections. Yet thousands of groups and individuals have lost confidence in our elections. The pandemic provided justification, or frankly, provided excuses to weaken the provisions that safeguard the integrity of our elections. When our election procedures were changed very radically, with very little advance notice, without any input from the people, without any input from the state legislatures, which is where the Constitution puts the authority, in the state legislature. But yet we had court orders, we had fiats from judges, we had governors who were extending voting periods, allowing ballot by mail. All of those things happened in a very short period of time. And I have to tell you, it happened here in Texas. The worst thing that happened in 2020 in Texas is that Governor Abbott extended early voting for an extra week. One extra week. How many people in Harris County can vote in a week? One of the bluest counties in the state of Texas. That 1 week harmed so many candidates, and it happened across the country. And it's a reason why people don't have confidence in our elections. Because if it happened now, it can happen again. So what is this crisis of confidence that we have? Our election security has been a problem for decades. We know that. Most of you probably know the story of Box 13 in Duval County. It's how LBJ became the United States Senator. He figured out how many votes he needed, and the county sheriff in Duval County magically found Box 13 that had the exact number of votes that LBJ needed to win. You saw it happen in Cook County, Illinois, in the JFK election. How many votes do we need to win? And sure enough, Cook County finds that many votes. So, we've had these problems for decades, but there are instances of fraud, illegality, error that are common throughout our history. Yet no political party has ever successfully made election integrity a priority. The Texas Republican Party has tried to make it a priority this session. Here we are, 18 days left, nothing has passed. We had all of this controversy that went on for months and months. The Democrats say that we've stormed the Capitol, and yet nothing has happened in the state of Texas. We've got to make it a priority. In 2000, the presidency was decided by fewer than 600 votes. And as you know, in Bush v. Gore, that was fought all the way to the Supreme Court. But what didn't happen is that we didn't take a realistic look at what happens down at the local level. After that election, there were investigations conducted by Congress. The Carter-Baker Commission was put together. And there's even testimony from the elections administrator from Harris County who said, I know for a fact that foreigners voted in the state of Texas in 2000. And yet today, if you go and say something like, hey, we need to clean up the voting rolls in the state of Texas, you'll be claimed to be a racist. You'll be claimed to be somebody who's trying to suppress the vote. And yet you have your own election officials testifying under oath to Congress that foreigners are voting in our elections. So beginning in 2002, the parties have relied increasingly on legal action as the tactic to impact election results. And I'll tell you that that is where we lost the 2020 election. We did not lose the 2020 election in the counting that happened afterwards. We lost the 2020 election before it even started. The Democrats went to court in every state that was a swing state, and they used the pandemic as an excuse to take away your franchise. What they did was they told these judges that, well, people are scared to get out of their house, so we need to send ballot by mail to everybody. Judge, I know that ballot harvesting is illegal in this state, but people are afraid to leave their house. So can you please let us have somebody go by and pick up a ballot? Because these people don't want to leave their house. Or could you put a drop box just someplace where people can go so they don't have to interact with anybody? Just set up a drop box. And across the country, it happened. Everywhere that the Democrats asked for it, they got it. And what does the evidence show us? We've lost election security. There's a drop in public confidence that's engendered confidence, and it engendered arguably the single greatest existential threat for our nation's future. And that is that we don't have integrity in our elections anymore. There's evidence of abundant fraud and error in the 2020 election. That means that there's not sufficient reason for concern and that this issue deserves the utmost attention that we can give it. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about H.R. 1 that's pending in front of Congress and S1. There was a hearing on it last Tuesday. But I will tell you that these issues are so difficult to talk about because you will be attacked every time you talk about them. And coming here tonight, I guarantee you that there'll be a story somewhere tomorrow about Trey Trainor goes and talks about it. He's trying to disenfranchise, thousands of Americans. Anyways, H.R. 1 and S1. H.R. 1 is the House version of the bill. S1 is what Senator Klobuchar put together as she's trying to put together some sort of compromise bill over in the Senate. Last Tuesday, I can't tell you how proud I am of what Senator Cruz did in that meeting. He sat through one of the longest Senate hearing markups that I have seen in a while, and he fought tooth and nail every amendment that the Democrats offered, and he offered some outstanding amendments that went down on party line votes. But he did an outstanding job having that fight. Senator McConnell did an outstanding job standing up for our First Amendment rights and for the makeup of the Federal Election Commission and for the ability of people to engage in the political process without being persecuted for it. But the Democrat leadership in Congress has proposed what is the most sweeping and dramatic rewriting of election laws in American history. It's nothing short of federalizing the elections. It's nothing short of undoing the Constitution. It is nothing short of illegally amending the Constitution through legislation. They want to take away the right of you as the citizens to elect the legislature of this state to decide how our elections are conducted. They want to tell you when you can vote, how you can vote, where you should vote. They want to make sure that those drop boxes that we had this past election cycle are set up everywhere in the country. They want to make sure that ballot by mail happens across the country. They want to make sure that anybody can vote absentee. I'm going to give you an example of how these type of things are a real problem. And you need to look at some places like Massachusetts and New Hampshire. One of the things that's in H.R. 1 is same-day voter registration. New Hampshire has same-day voter registration. It is 67 miles from Boston to Concord, New Hampshire. 67 miles. On election day, if you, and this particularly happens in the primaries, but since primary election day, you want to make sure you're a Democrat, you want to make sure that the most progressive candidate wins in New Hampshire. But you live in Massachusetts. You get in your car, you drive 20 minutes down the road. New Hampshire has same-day voter registration. You register to vote, you walk out, you get in your car, and you drive back to Massachusetts. That's what happens when you have same-day voter registration. And that's what they want to make law for the entire country. So, it really is, that's a current flaw in our election system. And various acts like that result in inaccuracies all over the place. Some electoral problems are criminal in nature, some are simply error. I mean, it's a human endeavor, we're all human, and there are going to be errors in elections. As an election lawyer, I hope so, that's how I make my living. But examples of things that we have happened in elections and have happened across the country is you have people voting more than once. We know that happens. You have people voting at an address that no longer is there, submitting more than one mail-in ballot, filling out and filing and mailing ballots intended for others, ballot harvesting, processing mail votes with no postmarks, not verifying signatures, accepting and counting votes after election day, state executives of courts modifying the details or deadlines of vote submissions and counting, and providing financial incentives to vote, international misconduct in our votes, computer tallies and software problems, dead people voting, improper curing of ballots, and unmonitored drop boxes, and then simple software errors that happen. So, that's the reason why we need election reform in the country. Now, there's hope. We have what's happened in Georgia. You've seen that. I wrote an op-ed about Major League Baseball leaving the state of Georgia, and I find it very ironic that they did this, but they leave the state of Georgia over the passage of Georgia's election integrity bill, and they move to Colorado, which has the very same laws that they just passed in Georgia. So, it's one of those things, the hypocrisy of the left knows no ends. But, as you know, in the wake of the 2020 election, President Trump criticized the Georgia Secretary of State and the governor there for how the election was conducted. Ironically, just weeks before he started criticizing, the Democrat state leadership in that state had similarly criticized them for years over the same thing. In 2021, the Republican majority legislature there passed, and Governor Kemp signed into law a bill that increased opportunities for voting and took action to cure Georgia's elections and make them more secure. That law increased the number of days of early voting to match something similar to what we have here in Texas. And there have been lots of inaccuracies in reporting on that. I'll be happy to go into that later, but I'm not going to go through all the details of the bill, but happy to talk with anybody that wants to talk about it. But what I want to talk to you about is what needs to be done going forward. And these are action steps for you as the grassroots. And I am so heartwarmed to see this many people here tonight to talk about election integrity. It really does my heart good to see that. Because without you fighting for these things, it's not going to happen. And this has to happen nationwide. But there are 4 things I'm going to talk to you about. One is how we secure voting at the polls, how we secure absentee voting, in the collecting and the processing votes, and maintaining a fair and accurate count. The single most important reform that can be made to our elections is to make sure that the vote is counted legally, honestly, and accurately. Perhaps the most important, most impactful change we can recommend is this. And this happened in Kentucky. And it happened by the Secretary of State, friend of mine, Mike Adams there, implemented this. No result should be released by any county authority until all of the counties are finished. No partial results should ever be released, and that will prevent the situation from ever happening where a candidate knows how many votes they need to win.
That's
It's very simple. And interestingly enough, Secretary Adams got that idea from a Democrat primary in Wisconsin. They were the first ones to implement it. So all you have to do, and I know, and for the politicians in the room, you're going to hate that. You want to know at 7 o'clock how much early vote did I get? How far behind am I? And those of you that work in the polling locations, you want to know whether or not your candidate won. But I'm going to tell you, for the integrity of our elections, the best thing that could happen is we find out at 1 o'clock in the morning, after all the counting is done. But in order for that to happen, counting has got to start immediately when the polls close, and it keeps going until the count is finished. Nobody goes home. That counting has to be done openly, with the media and the public having access to oversee it. Now in Texas, we have a law that says that the media is supposed to be allowed access to the polling locations. And we saw it across the country, where they said, okay, we're going to let the media set up out here and they can film in there, but then they started putting paper over the windows so that they couldn't see what was going on. What are they hiding? What are they hiding? I personally would tell you that I think in your local counties, you ought to advocate that voting take place in places that have cameras. If you look around this room right now, there are cameras all over the place. Now this may be used as a polling location on election day. Are those cameras running? You ought to make sure that the county commissioners make sure that those cameras are running, so that if something happens at this polling location, you have visual evidence of it. We're going to talk in a minute about some of the problems that they had with the lawsuits afterwards. And a lot of it had to do with evidentiary issues, not having enough evidence. But having video cameras in polling locations would solve that particular issue. So, anyways, votes should be counted. Now, votes should be on paper, and votes should be counted by hand. This use of these machines that can be manipulated and those type of things, we've got to get rid of it. And no counting should take place without poll watchers being present. In Texas, every candidate is allowed 2 poll watchers at every counting location and at every polling location. 2. And the party is allowed 2. That means if there are 50 candidates on the ballot, there could be 100 poll watchers in one polling location. And that's what needs to happen. That's how you keep an election fair and honest. Have 100 people watching 8 people do the work. It'll be fair and honest then. That may be true. So, second step, we have to secure voting at the polls. We have to specify that only legal citizens are allowed to vote. We have to make sure that their primary residence must be in the state, and they must have lived there for at least 30 days. You got to be a resident of the state. We cannot have you going from Massachusetts to New Hampshire on election day because you know you're throwing away your vote in Massachusetts, but New Hampshire's a swing state, so I'm going to vote there. You've got to live in the state for at least 30 days. Photo ID's got to be required. And that's not me saying it. Jimmy Carter's the one who came up with the idea. The Carter-Baker Commission, after the 2000 election, said that one of the best things that could be done to instill confidence in the elections is the institution of photo ID at polling locations. S1 and HR1 does away with all photo ID requirements. They'll allow you to sign an affidavit that says, I am who I am. So, voting must be in person. Frankly, I would prefer for it to happen on election day and eliminate a lot of the early voting that we have, and I know that's going to be tough on some of you, but I think there's a reason that the founders called it election day, not election month, not election week. Now, if we are going to have absentee ballots, third thing we can do, step 3, we have to ensure honest absentee voting. Absentee ballots should only be allowed on request and for a reason. Texas, you used to have a reason to have an absentee ballot. You had to say, hey, look, I'm going to be out of the state on election day. I'm not going to be able to vote. You had to sign an affidavit that said that. And if you were in there, your vote wasn't going to, if you were in the state, it wasn't going to count. It must be applied for and delivered before Election Day. You know, you saw these things where ballots are actually coming in before they were actually mailed in this past election. They must be counted the day that they're received. And obviously the mass distribution of unrequested absentee ballots has to be absolutely prohibited. And all of those ballots have to be secured at appropriate polling locations. They have to be verified through a chain of custody, and there needs to be signature verification that takes place on those ballots when they come in. The fourth thing that we need to do with regard to election integrity is to ensure equal protection through the honest collection and processing of votes. We cannot allow the curing of votes after they have been cast. You cannot allow that to happen. You're just asking for fraud at that point. And I'm going to tell you, I've seen it happen. I have seen it happen in an election contest that I tried before the Texas House of Representatives. One of the witnesses that we called in the case was a professor from the University of Texas. The Republican had lost the election by 12 votes. We had proved at the time that the professor got on the stand that 11 votes should not be counted. So we were down to 1 vote. The professor gets on the stand, clearly without question, he's a Democrat. There's no question in my mind he's a Democrat. But in the election contest, you have to ask the question, and it's the one time that you're allowed to actually violate the privacy of the ballot because there's a question. And the question was, Professor, can you tell us who you voted for? And he told us that he had voted for the Republican. Nobody in the room believed him. Everybody knew exactly who he voted for, but he knew that if he said he voted for the Democrat, we were in a tied election and the House of Representatives was going to get to vote on who took the seat. And we had 100 Republicans at the time. So I can tell you, curing ballots after the election does nothing but invite fraud. Ballot harvesting, another thing, has to be prohibited. It's only legal right now in California. Under H.R. 1, they want to allow ballot harvesting to happen across the country. They say, well, there's people in nursing homes, they can't get out, they can't make it to vote. You know, we need to go over there, we need to be allowed to help these people. That's not true. These people get out all the time. These nursing homes, you all know. I mean, they have buses that take them to go to various events. They have buses that take them to go to the grocery store, things of that nature. And in Texas, we have laws. Every state has laws that allows for family members to help the elderly, the infirm, and those with disabilities to be able to vote. We have a federal law under the Help America Vote Act that helps people with disabilities be able to vote from their car at a polling location. So there's no reason to have ballot harvesting. Unattended ballot boxes and these receptacles that are set out, again, absolute invitation for fraud. I just go make copies of ballots, fill them out, stick them in there, and guess what? Whether they count them or not, they now have a problem. Because there's a ton of ballots in there that nobody knows what to do with, and every judge is afraid to disenfranchise a voter. The state legislature should be the only mechanism by which we modify our election laws. Governors, Secretary of State, state and federal courts should not be allowed to unilaterally modify any of our local election laws. That is why we elect our state representatives, and that is why the founders said that the state legislatures were responsible for conducting the elections. What is going on in Washington, D.C. is unconstitutional. The courts can strike down a law for being unconstitutional, but they cannot simply rewrite those laws because they don't like the outcome. Now, where do you come in? These 4 things that I've talked about, where you come in is by and here in Texas, it's real easy. You reach out to the legislature, you tell them to pass that election integrity bill that's pending right now, that has most of these solutions in it. And it's not. But more importantly, you've got to get on the phone, you've got to call people in Washington, D.C. Now look, our Republicans, 100% against it. It's already passed through the House. Senator Cruz, Senator Cornyn, they're fighting against it. The best thing you can do is pump up Joe Manchin, make sure that we have the filibuster in place. As long as the filibuster is in place, S1 and HR1 will not pass. Because I do not believe that the Senate is going to go the route of doing away with the filibuster to pass that bill. I think what they're doing right now is having a show trial of going through and saying we did our very best to try to get this to pass, but it didn't make it. But you've got to organize on the local level, and these reforms have got to happen. They've got to happen across the country. And one of the things that I'm doing on that front is encouraging folks like yourselves and other states to get organized, like you're organized here tonight. There are a lot of states that have initiative and referendum, and a lot of these things can be passed through initiative and referendum, and I think that's our best avenue to make sure that these things happen. It's great that we have a Republican legislature in Georgia that's willing to stand up. They should have stood up before the 2020 election, but at least they've stood up now. Pennsylvania is doing the same thing. The audit that's going on in Arizona is great, but people using the initiative and referendum process to pass these common sense election integrity reforms is what needs to happen. And you need to encourage your friends in other states that these things need to happen, and they need to look into whether or not they have that ability. If they don't, they've got to get on the phone and they've got to call their legislators, they've got to call their representatives, they've got to call their senators and say, this is the most important issue that we have facing the country. Because if we don't, in 2022, it doesn't matter how mad you are, it doesn't matter how upset you are, they're going to steal it again. So, what I told Ray I wanted to do is that I wanted to be able to take questions from the audience, because I know you all have questions, and I know I didn't address everything. So, with that, I want to just conclude my remarks and let y'all know that I greatly appreciate you allowing me to come tonight. Like I said, it just warms my heart to see this many people concerned about election integrity. I've enjoyed speaking with you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. That's okay.
Just 1 second, we're going to try to get a mic down here.
So the question was, what about the Dominion machines? There's been a lot of focus on the Dominion machines, and I have taken a lot of flack for a tweet that I put out. By the way, it's at TXElectionLaw is my hashtag, or is my name on Twitter. But I've taken a lot of flack from the left for my support of Sidney Powell and her efforts. As you know, the Dominion voting machines are not allowed in Texas, and that's part of the process. When I was at the Secretary of State's office, there's a certification process that goes on between the Secretary of State's office and the Attorney General's office. But look, the fact of the matter is, whether it's Dominion or anybody else, any machine that can be hooked up to the internet can be hacked. Okay? Period. Okay?
We do it a lot.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any machine that can be hooked up to the internet can be hacked. And we see, and you don't have to look at elections to know that. You can look at what happened just this week. A major pipeline company in this country just paid $5 million to have their computers turned back on so that they could pump oil and gas to the country. We know that it was Russian hackers that did it. Okay, and the president came out and talked about it today. Okay, so any machine that can be hooked up to the internet needs to not be used in an election.
I'd like to know why the Supreme Court did not want to hear any of our arguments.
Sure.
You have an idea about that?
I do. A lot of the attorneys that worked in this past election are good friends of mine. I've known them for years. And I will tell you one of the biggest problems that we have, and this is really someplace where y'all can help out a lot. One of the biggest problems that we had in all of these court cases is the level of evidence that we have. Not having poll watchers actually in polling locations, seeing firsthand what happened, and being able to give firsthand testimony as to what happened, made the burden for those attorneys much higher to have to prove their cases. And so it made it much easier for those federal courts to rule against them, to say, well, that's hearsay evidence. You're just showing me a video of a guy bringing in a suitcase, but I don't have anybody who actually testified to seeing him bring it in. You're just showing me the video. And yeah, it looks like a suitcase, but nobody's willing to tell me that they saw it. Or you're not bringing in the guy who called in the suitcase. And so without that level of evidence, you get the judge dismissing the case. And then when it gets to the Supreme Court, they're not going to be able to take a case that they can't point to and say, this evidence actually shows that this happened. And a lot of those cases, again, equal protection claims came up in those, and the equal protection claims were not really built to be able to allow the Supreme Court to rule the same way they did in Bush v. Gore. In Bush v. Gore, you actually had counties that were handling the ballots differently. Because the Democrats had done such a good job on the front end of getting ballots mailed to everybody, of having drop boxes set up everywhere, they ensured that there was equal protection because everybody had the same accessibility of the ballots. And so the equal protection claims kind of went away at that point. So it made it very difficult on the Supreme Court to be able to take those cases, made it very difficult on some very good judges to be able to rule.
Judicial Watch reported this month 1.9 billion votes they found that were illegal. Are you familiar with Judicial Watch?
I know who Judicial Watch is, yes. I have not seen that report.
Yeah, so my name's Tim Cox. I've been down in the Capitol 5 times, focused on election integrity. That's why I drove here to Denton County. And when I'm talking to our state representatives, they want proof. Like Representative Guerin told me, Texas is fine. We got conservatives in office. We don't need to screw with our election laws. And I'm just kind of flabbergasted at that. He wants hard evidence. So obviously there seems to be a lot of evidence. You're saying they're not affidavits. There are tons of affidavits.
There are tons of There are tons of eyewitnesses. Yes, no, there are tons of affidavits. There are tons of affidavits that were taken after the fact. A lot of those affidavits were presented to the committees in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, to the legislatures. Those affidavits, unfortunately, were not collected at the time that the court cases were pending, and so they weren't able to be presented to the court. I'm actually in the process of working with some folks right now, kind of going through a lot of that material to figure out exactly what happened during the election. So, again, it goes back to what I said earlier. After the 2000 election, everybody rushed to Florida to figure out what happened. Nobody's rushing to figure out what happened right now. So we're in the process of doing that. And what I would tell Representative Guerin is what I said earlier. When the governor can add without anybody's permission, without the legislature saying so, when he can say, we're going to have an extra week of early voting across the state, you have a problem in the state of Texas. And that's exactly what I would tell you. You absolutely have to reform the election laws in the state of Texas. When you have, look, if Dominion creates a new machine, they can bring it to Texas and have it certified. Okay? If you have a machine that can be hooked up to the internet, the legislature needs to address that problem. In 2018, in the election, the Secretary of State gave the Dallas County Elections Administrator permission for ES&S to have a computer hooked up to the internet in the countywide. Yeah. It absolutely happened. We lost Senator Huffines in that race.
Over here. Right here. So when you be so kind that when we talk to our commissioner court, how we promote the paper ballot, because they're gonna say, oh, we just got all these new computers, we just got all this for certain areas, and so they will be receptive. Don't we have to go by law through the procedures to get it back to paper ballot?
You do, but there are machines that use paper ballots that they have. I will tell you that there is renewed interest in the legislature over which machines get certified. I think it's very important for us to talk to the Attorney General's office about which machines get certified for the elections. And I know it costs money, but look, voting is the most important thing that we do. It's the most sacred right that we have. It's the only way we're going to be able to protect our republic. And our commissioners' courts are going to have to make a hard decision. They're going to have to decide that we need to have paper. And they need to understand that it's their job that's being affected by that. It's their job that's being affected by that.
Hello, sir. People a little younger than me, a lot of them, don't even care to vote for one main reason. And I actually don't understand it myself, and it kind of makes me irritated. Why are we making laws that the Constitution already says? I mean, why the liberals made laws to take away our Constitutional rights, and we have to make laws to bring it back? That's it's a bunch of bullshit.
Well, apathy amongst young voters is not something new, but it is very important for us to make sure that we engage with young people and reach out to them. Now, in talking about engagement, President Trump did a remarkable job in engaging new people into the Republican Party. He did a great job of reaching out to the Hispanic community. He did an outstanding job of reaching out to the African American community. If you look at the votes in Harris County, he did a great job reaching out to the Asian community. And I will tell you, the fruits of that are going to bear out in the redistricting process. Because now the Democrats have a problem in the redistricting process. In the past, it's been, well, that's a Hispanic seat, and they vote Democrat, and therefore we have to keep it as a Democrat seat. Well, guess what problem they have in redistricting in Texas now? There's a lot of people in a bunch of Democrat districts that voted for a Republican president and for U.S. Senate. John Cornyn and President Trump got an enormous amount of Hispanic support. Yes, sir.
With all the election fraud, we know that our president won this election. So we have a lot of evidence that's out there. We know that's there. If we are able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the election was stolen, does it make any difference now, or is it just for future elections?
That's an excellent question. I would say I would take the same approach that President Trump did to that. President Trump has put it behind him. He is focused on winning the House in 2022. He's focused on taking back the Senate so that we don't have a 50-50 split there. And he's focused on making sure that we have America First conservatives take those seats in Congress from the right over all that are there. And I think that's what we need to focus on right now. And we, like I've outlined here, we know that there are problems in the election. But we know what we need to do to fix those things. So what we need to do is fix those problems, make sure that they don't happen again, and put all of our efforts into supporting the right candidates who are going to go into Congress, so that in 2024, you can elect a pro-America First president again.
Thank you for serving us, first of all. I'm currently in a case against Dallas County, in which we're now at Texas Supreme Court with the issue of standing of poll watchers. I'd like you to address that issue as it's being used and abused across the country, standing. And the second is a case in which I am a contestant against the $1.1 million bond election for Dallas College. And although there are questions of my standing as a poll watcher, in one case, I was able to proceed to a trial in December as a contestant, so apparently I have standing, but unfortunately the district judge didn't decide in our favor. So in that, the lawyers for ES&S and for the county said that the source code, the tabulation computers, is a trade secret. Our tax dollars are paying for something they're calling a trade secret. So if you address, I think you know where I stand on that. How do you feel about your tax dollars paying for something where, like Maricopa County, they don't even have the logins or passwords? They're letting the voting machine and software company run the election without county control.
So my general opinion of that is that that information should be public information. If it is particular to the company for economic reasons, there are ways to get it to the court. They can file it under seal so that the court and the plaintiffs and everybody can look at it. They can do non-disclosures with regard to that. The issue on your other case with regard to standing, it's the easiest way for judges not to have to address the issues in election contests. They say, well, you don't have standing. That's the first thing they say. Well, you don't have standing to bring it right now. And then on the back end, so you can't bring it before. You know there's going to be a problem, but you can't bring it right now because the problem hadn't happened. So then the problem happens and the total doesn't happen. And then you bring it on the back end, and the judge uses this legal term, and I'm trying to teach law school class, called latches, and they say, well, you should have brought it before because you knew it was going to happen. And I'll tell you, that's what happened to us in Virginia when Governor Perry convicted the ballot in Virginia. with the signatures there, we challenged the constitutionality of the provision of the Virginia code that said they had to collect a certain number of signatures. And the judge said, well, you knew you weren't going to collect enough signatures to begin with, therefore you should have brought your case earlier. But we brought our case earlier, he said, we haven't even tried to collect the signatures. So it's a typical maneuver that they use to get rid of what they consider to be tough cases. But I'll tell you, most judges are looking, in my opinion, to kind of split the baby. And the unfortunate thing about election law cases is they don't settle. There is no splitting the baby. There's a winner and there's a loser. And judges, they're just, in these days, just aren't willing to take a tough stand. Yes, sir.
I realize we're here tonight talking about the election, voter integrity here in Texas. I want to fast forward to 2022, 2024. How are we going to ensure that these other states that did this to us in 2020 are not going to do it to us again in 2022 and 2024?
Well, that's where I think you as individuals have to reach out to friends and counterparts across the country. Those people here who are on the SREC, when you go to the Republican National Convention, when you go to the various RNC meetings, you need to make sure that these other state leaders are addressing these issues, that they are focused on election integrity and fixing these problems that they have in these other states. If that audit in Arizona turns out to prove what we all believe to be the truth there, we've got to make sure that the Arizona legislature addresses that. There's got to be an uprising of the people that says you've got to address these issues. And when I say that, I'm not telling everybody to march to the Capitol. Just to be clear, I'm just saying that you have a First Amendment right to petition your government for the redress of grievances, and that is a major grievance that needs to be redressed.
One more question.
Trey, the Arizona audit appears to have some of the most positive opportunities for improving the fraud issue. Recently, the Department of Justice has jumped into that, even though the Constitution is very clear on who has legal authority there. But what is the FEC's role in that, and your opinion on the Department of Justice jumping in?
So the FEC, unfortunately, we don't have any jurisdiction with regard to the audit that's going on there. Really, the only place that would have any remotely federal jurisdiction would be the Elections Assistance Commission, and they're over there for purposes of kind of providing overall standards, nationwide standards, things of that nature. It really should not be a federal process. And the founders were very wise when they set it up for this to be a state-run process. It's great in Texas that this is a county-run process, that your local commissioner's court is as far as you have to go to get these issues addressed. Simple things like, hey, let's make sure we have cameras on these polling locations. And when I say that, when cameras at the polling locations, if that means that we have to set up polling locations every 7-Eleven because that's the only place that they have cameras, then we're going to go to 7-Eleven.
Hi, I came from Navarro County. I'm an election judge there. We use ES&S, and here's my problem, is they certified machines, I don't know how long ago, but then they make changes. And sometimes they make changes right before the election or during the election, as happened in our last election, where we had 23 people running for Ron Waxy. My other thing is Senator Bob House had a really good suggestion. You don't shut off the early voting machines until 7 p.m. on election day. Then that can't be used for counting votes.
So I would like for you to get this gentleman over here and call Charlie Garrett's office and tell him this problem, because you're exactly right. The certification of the machines happens and then the software gets updated. They say, well, we haven't changed the machine, but we've updated the software. That is an issue that needs to be addressed by the legislature. They should have to go through a recertification process to say, hey, this can't be happening. We know from the hackers conference that happens in Vegas every year, you can find it all over YouTube, where a 15-year-old with an iPhone can hook up to one of these machines and can manipulate the machine. So every time there's a change. The other thing that needs to happen is that the machine, and I'm going to get way in the weeds on this because your question just reminds me of it, is those machines that are used for early voting, they need to not be used on election day. Because one of the biggest problems we have in recounts is, well, they didn't recalibrate the machine, so it still has the early votes on it, and now it looks like 10,000 people voted in one precinct, when in actuality there were 1,000 that voted there were 9,000 that voted early.
Okay, I'm hoping you know more about this than I do, and this is from last Tuesday. From what I heard, it sounds like in Harris County, there were 2.5 million votes sitting on a dock that somehow or other were challenged, and it did get before the Texas Supreme Court. They had it under guard there. But my question really is how we would spot something like that, and somebody, there's some chain of activity that got it to the Supreme Court for them to hold it there. What do you know about that? What can you tell us?
I don't know very much about that, but it reminds me of what happened during the 2020 election when the Trump ballots are found, in the creek or in the garbage can and those type of things. That's why it's so important for all of these ballots to have a chain of custody. It's the biggest reason why we shouldn't have blanket mail-out ballots. Frankly, it's one of the reasons why we should limit early voting so that we don't have ballots floating around out there beforehand. It's one of those things that just proves that there are places in the system that can be manipulated very, very easily. And unfortunately, look, I'm up here advocating that we need to go to paper ballots, and it's really easy these days to get a copy machine to make a ballot that looks like that. I mean, you're still going to have these problems, but you got to have these chain of custody safeguards to go along with it. And we have some pretty strong chain of custody safeguards in Texas, but I think they can be enhanced by making sure, in Texas, it's supposed to be that the sheriff has the key to the ballot boxes, the sheriff's supposed to maintain it, and for all practical purposes, the sheriff does have access to it, but really it's the election administrator that's holding it. The election administrator is not somebody who's elected by the people. It really does need to be the sheriff that has it. It really needs to be a process by which I have to pick up the phone and call the sheriff to unlock the box, so that the sheriff has to come and say, yes, this is the combination for this particular box it is, and it hadn't been anywhere else. We need to make sure that those processes are followed. You have to volunteer as a poll watcher to do that. Like I said, every candidate up and down the ballot is allowed 2 poll watchers. The party is allowed 2 poll watchers. You should have more poll watchers at the polling location than you have people voting.
Yes, I hope I'm the only person in the room that has this problem, but I think not. I have been making calls to my representatives on the state and national level since I was in my 20s. I have never been so frustrated as I have been in the last couple of years, not being late for anybody. And I don't expect to talk to the representative, but to the liaison, if I ask for that. I cannot even understand that. Only the person who answers the phone, and you know right where my contact goes in file 13. And I ask for callbacks to see if I can talk to the representative or liaison. Never am I able to call back. So who works for who? And you're telling me or us to readdress it with our Congress people? Or our time is precious too, and they just ignore us.
I don't disagree with your comment, but I can tell you that if you fail to make those phone calls, you absolutely will fail to have any change take place if you fail to make those phone calls. The other thing I would encourage you, and look, Senator Hall is a very good friend, so I'm not telling you all, please don't tell him that I need to do this. Don't show up here in his town hall that he's having next month and complain about the elections because he's been over backwards to do everything he can to get that election integrity bill put through. But you all have the ability to go to the neighboring Senate district and cause a ruckus there about election integrity not passing if they don't pass it here in Texas. And you have the ability to call your friends up there and tell them to go and make a ruckus at the town hall meetings that they have. So when these representatives, when these legislators have these town hall meetings, make sure that you get there, make sure that you talk about these issues, and make sure that they know that you're upset about it. With that, I really appreciate